Hooded process church members surrounding famous Hollywood stars turned into cult members' text, cult literature mixed with movie contracts. The Elegant Darkness: How a Cult of the Elite was Born. What if I told you that in the decade of peace and free love, a cult unlike any other established a beachhead right in the middle of Hollywood, drawing in the children and even the careers of some of the industry's most revered icons? This was not a group of rural, disenfranchised followers seeking simple salvation. This was a high-concept, intellectually sophisticated organization designed to appeal specifically to the troubled and searching minds of the affluent elite. We are speaking of the Process Church of the Final Judgment, an organization that, for a terrifying period, turned the existential angst of the Golden Age into a potent and effective recruitment tool. The Process was founded by a British couple, Robert and Mary Ann de Grimston. Robert was a student of architecture, providing the structural vision. Mary Ann was a former advertising copywriter with an immense talent for organization, marketing, and strategic presentation. Their journey began in London, emerging from the philosophical shadows of Scientology before quickly developing their own, far darker, doctrinal framework centered on dualism and apocalypse. They strategically cultivated an air of mystery and intellectual superiority, differentiating themselves sharply from other spiritual movements of the time. They did not market themselves with the cheap trappings of a street-level movement, demanding total commitment, labor, and significant financial contributions up front from their dedicated followers. Their image was one of severe, elegant darkness. Members wore flowing black capes and robes, often adorned with silver dog collar pendants, transforming themselves into an almost monastic, highly stylized presence that was impossible to ignore in the brightly colored 1960s. Their philosophy was the very essence of contradiction, complex, intense, and designed to shock the bourgeois sensibility of mid-century society while simultaneously offering a totalizing worldview. The core of the Process theology was the shocking reconciliation of the four great gods: Jehovah, the god of fear and severe judgment; Lucifer, the god of light and pure intellect; Satan, the god of separation and destruction, often associated with pleasure and materialism; and Christ, the god of unity and forgiveness. The de Grimstons proposed that humanity was living through the Judgment Day, a necessary period of conflict and purification, where these four opposing yet necessary forces would finally meet and unify. For a camera operator struggling with existential dread, or a young starlet seeking deeper meaning beyond the fleeting nature of fame, this terrifying dichotomy felt like the only honest reflection of the world they lived in. It legitimized the internal conflicts they faced every day, the struggle between artistic ambition and morality, between their public performance and their authentic self. This immediate personal validation is what first drew figures like Jane Doe, a prominent television script editor, into their orbit, setting the stage for bigger names to follow. The dark elegance of the Process captivated troubled artists, rebellious heiresses, and, shockingly, some of the biggest names in Hollywood, including Dean Martin's family, the tortured existence of the Beach Boys, and a mysterious leading man known for his rugged Western roles. This potent mix of celebrity allure and terrifying philosophy created a psychological vortex that swallowed up the spiritually vulnerable. Studios had always managed the public lives of their stars, dictating everything from their choice of spouse to their political opinions, but they had no defense against a philosophical movement that co-opted the very language of art and existential searching. This cult presented itself not as a group seeking power, but as a high-minded exploration of humanity's ultimate fate. It was a Trojan horse of theology, carried through the exclusive social circles of Laurel Canyon and the Sunset Strip, often introduced by seemingly intellectual friends. When stars like Marilyn Monroe sought refuge in psychiatric help or alcohol to cope with the immense pressure of their personas, the second generation of Hollywood's troubled youth sought answers in the intellectual terror of the Process. Their presence, often silent and intimidating in their black regalia, created a subtle sense of menace that unsettled the established order, preying on those who felt trapped by their parents' success or the gilded cage of celebrity. The church's highly formal, almost militaristic structure offered a strict discipline that was a paradoxical attraction for those whose lives were defined by chaos. For children raised on their parents' fabricated perfection, the strict rules and absolute philosophical certainty of the process were immensely appealing, offering an illusion of control over their complicated lives. The Day Grimstons established their official headquarters in Los Angeles in the late 1960s, capitalizing on the prevailing atmosphere of spiritual curiosity and countercultural rebellion. They first rented a compound near Santa Monica, using it as a base for their organized outreach and to host their intense weekend seminars, which were often emotionally and psychologically taxing. The Hollywood Hills offered a perfect crucible, a place where fame was temporary, money was easy, and the search for authentic selfhood was desperate. The cult offered a perverse form of authenticity, a chance to confront one's personal demons by identifying with one of the four opposing deities. For the children of stars who grew up on fabricated reality, the process promised an intense, unvarnished truth, no matter how terrifying. The sophisticated facade they presented made it virtually impossible for parents and studio executives to dismiss them as simple fanatics. They were dismissed instead as high art philosophers, a failure of understanding that would cost some Hollywood families dearly. This sophisticated bait was primarily delivered through a printed publication, granting them a legitimacy that a roadside prophet could never achieve, elevating them above the common fringe movement and into the realm of intellectual debate. The magazine of high art subversion. We must first understand the bait that drew Hollywood's curious minds. That bait was a glossy, high-concept publication titled simply The Process. This magazine was the ultimate calling card for the intellectually curious, creating intrigue with its sheer artistic quality and shocking subject matter. Imagine the scene. It is 1968. A famous film director walks into the Zeitgeist bookstore on La Cienega Boulevard, searching for obscure European philosophy, only to find this stark, disturbing magazine prominently displayed on the counter. The contrast was calculated. The juxtaposition of darkness and high art in the brightly lit, superficial world of Los Angeles was instantly magnetic to the city's restless intellectuals, drawing them in through aesthetic appeal before delivering the hardline theology. This was no cheaply printed religious tract. The Process magazine was a masterpiece of graphic design and strategic presentation, often resembling an art journal more than a sectarian newsletter. Published in high-quality paper, it featured striking, often disturbing, black and white photography that evoked a sense of goth-tinged European sophistication and a deliberate air of mystery. The writing was dense, mixing philosophical musings on Nietzsche and Gurdjieff with the church's own evolving theological framework. They published essays that explored the complex duality of human nature, suggesting that true spiritual advancement required confrontation with one's darkest impulses and embracing the darkness within. It contained articles on animal sacrifice, symbolic, not literal, often using the theme of the willing surrender of the ego, essays on the true meaning of evil, and existential poetry that read like a collaboration between a university professor and an avant-garde artist. This was literature designed to flatter the reader's intelligence and challenge their moral assumptions. The magazine's circulation targeted the exact demographic the Day Grimstons sought: the affluent, the bored, and the spiritually curious members of the intelligentsia and the arts community. They distributed it not through street vendors, but through exclusive, independent bookstores, art galleries, and hip coffee shops in areas like Laurel Canyon, Greenwich Village, and London's swinging Chelsea district. They knew precisely where the intellectual seekers of the counterculture congregated, avoiding the masses entirely and focusing on key centers of influence. In the late 1960s, when the counterculture was searching for meaning beyond the materialism of their parents, the Process offered a terrifying yet alluring intellectual alternative, a forbidden knowledge that promised spiritual superiority and unique insight into the apocalypse. The articles acted as an invitation to an exclusive club. They signaled that the reader was intelligent enough to handle the church's intense and often frightening premises, a potent form of flattery for insecure artists. For the children of Hollywood stars, who often struggled to define themselves outside of their famous parents' identity, the publication offered a sense of profound individuality and superior spiritual understanding, elevating them above the superficiality they witnessed daily. The magazine would sometimes feature photographs of members engaged in serious-looking, esoteric rituals, further emphasizing their exclusivity and the secret knowledge they possessed, reinforcing the idea of a privileged, chosen few. The church's strategic move from the United Kingdom to Mexico and finally to the United States was precisely coordinated to maximize this cultural penetration into the American entertainment capital. By establishing their base near Los Angeles, they gained direct access to the film and music industries, where anxiety and the need for validation ran highest. Publicists and studio fixers, who could easily discredit a traditional preacher, were paralyzed by this group of well-dressed, intensely articulate people speaking a language of existential philosophy that sounded frighteningly close to the dialogue in an art house film, making it difficult to ridicule them publicly or dismiss their influence entirely. The magazine acted as a crucial filter. Those who embraced its dark aesthetic and complex, often confusing, philosophy were deemed worthy of recruitment. They were seen as seekers who could provide two things essential for the church's expansion: financial resources and intellectual legitimacy. The publication effectively neutralized the standard Hollywood defense mechanism of dismissal, instead forcing a conversation about art, evil, and the ultimate truth. The very conversations that ran late into the night at every exclusive, insecure Hollywood party. The process used this publication to introduce its members, portraying them as dignified, dedicated philosophers. They were never shown as beggars or hippies, but as elegant, serious individuals on a profound quest. This allowed the church to successfully breach the protective layer of Hollywood's insular community, creating a new and highly disruptive presence that fed on the psychological fragility of the elite. The Siren song of the occult, Carl Wilson and Dennis Wilson's cult entanglements. The church's influence reached its apex in the music world, touching one of the era's most revered, yet most troubled, American institutions, the Beach Boys. This was an unsettling contrast between the music of perpetual summer and the reality of profound personal shadows. The band's famous California sound was all sunshine and optimism. But behind the harmonies lay a fractured family structure and profound mental instability, particularly for brothers Dennis Wilson and Carl Wilson. Dennis, the drummer, was the quintessential troubled spirit, handsome, impulsive, and constantly seeking external solutions to his profound internal unrest. His spiritual searching led him to a number of disreputable figures, most famously Charles Manson. But his connection to the process was equally detrimental and often overlapped with his other dangerous associations. He was perpetually chasing a sense of spiritual freedom that fame could not provide, finding solace in extreme and chaotic pursuits. Dennis was drawn to the dark, philosophical exploration offered by the cult. He saw in their embrace of the dark deities a reflection of his own chaotic, self-destructive tendencies. The church's intellectualized approach to evil provided a perverse form of justification for his excesses, framing his instability as a necessary spiritual journey through darkness. While Dennis's connection was often erratic and based on personal fascination, his brief but intense periods of interest caused immense stress for his bandmates and managers who desperately tried to keep him grounded. The involvement of his brother Carl, however, was far more financially and spiritually profound and long-lasting, a deeper allegiance that went beyond mere curiosity. Carl Wilson, the member known for his soulful vocals and calming presence in the band, became deeply immersed in the cult's teachings. Carl was a sensitive soul, prone to seeking spiritual solace, and he fell completely under the Day Grimston's spell, viewing them as genuine spiritual guides and philosophers. His support was not limited to mere philosophical agreement. It was total, bordering on obsession and demanding all his attention. He provided the church with considerable financial support, believing in their mission to reconcile the forces of good and evil. He even contributed his own song, All This Is That, to a Process Church album, directly integrating their philosophy into his public artistic output, a direct advertisement for the cult. More disturbingly, Carl housed Process members, integrating their unsettling presence directly into his personal life and the lives of those around him, using the band's resources to support the group and its activities, blurring the lines between the band and the cult. The contrast between the Beach Boys' public image and this private reality was jarring. While the band was touring, promoting songs of eternal summer and teenage romance, one of its founding members was actively supporting a group that believed in the literal existence of Satan and the necessity of confronting the darkest sides of humanity. Other band members and close associates later recounted the unsettling atmosphere created by the Process members who were constantly around Carl, their black capes and intense stares clashing violently with the laid-back, sun-drenched atmosphere of the California music scene. The tension caused by the cult's presence contributed to friction within the band during a critical creative period, threatening their professional stability and legacy. Carl Wilson's involvement was a costly affair, draining his finances and distracting him professionally at a crucial time in the band's career. The psychological strain of maintaining this bizarre double life, singing good vibrations while reading tracks about the coming apocalypse, was immense, causing him periods of extreme withdrawal. His entanglement serves as a profound example of how the vulnerability and existential searching, endemic to celebrity life, made even the most outwardly successful people susceptible to sophisticated manipulation. The church preyed on a need for meaning that fame simply could not satisfy. The financial and psychological toll on Carl was severe, marking the first major celebrity story that shows the destructive impact of the cult on artistic integrity and personal well-being, nearly dismantling one of America's most cherished musical groups. The Process's darkest legacy, the lingering shadow of Charles Manson. But the Process's darkest period was inextricably tied to one of the most volatile personalities Dennis Wilson had ever welcomed into his life, Charles Manson. The story of the Process, however, can never be entirely separated from the horrifying acts of serious violence that defined the end of the 1960s, acts of serious violence orchestrated by Charles Manson. The shadow of those terrible occurrences permanently altered the cult's perception in the public eye, shifting them from philosophical curiosity to public enemy number one. The persistent rumor of a direct Manson Process link, while never conclusively proven by official investigations, hung like a toxic cloud over the church and severely damaged its efforts to be seen as a legitimate philosophical movement. This link was created through both proximity and shared ideology. As mentioned, Dennis Wilson's chaotic life had led him to associate with both the Process and, for a period, Charles Manson himself, even allowing Manson's followers to stay at his home on Sunset Boulevard before the occurrences unfolded. In the atmosphere of paranoia and sensationalism that followed the terrible occurrences of August 1969, the public and the press searched for connections, and the Process provided a frighteningly similar philosophical framework, drawing immediate and unwanted scrutiny. The church's infamous theological premise, the reconciliation of Jehovah, Lucifer, Satan, and Christ, sounded terrifyingly close to Manson's own confused, apocalyptic ravings about helter-skelter. Manson had preached an imminent race war and a final judgment that involved destruction and chaos. The Process's own dark imagery and focus on the destructive deities, Jehovah and Satan, made them immediate suspects in the public imagination, whether or not their members had any direct involvement in the violent acts. The media exploited the visual similarities, a group of intense individuals with dark clothing and esoteric beliefs, to weave a terrifying narrative of connection, cementing their negative image and linking them to one of the decade's most infamous crimes. The connection was amplified when the church was forced to take the extraordinary measure of publicly distancing itself from Manson. In a dramatic open letter published in the Los Angeles Free Press and later circulated widely, the church flatly refuted any association with Manson, denying he was a participant and condemning his criminal actions. They even published an issue of their magazine dedicated to analyzing Manson's philosophy, attempting to draw an intellectual line between his crude, apocalyptic vision and their own sophisticated theology, a desperate attempt to salvage their reputation. However, the damage was done. For many in the public eye, the Process became synonymous with the sinister, dark undercurrents of the counterculture that had ended in violent confrontation, and the sophisticated veneer of the church crumbled under the weight of this association. This terrifying association effectively ended the church's ability to recruit freely from the high-profile Hollywood elite. The risk was simply too great. A star could endure an extramarital affair, a gambling problem, or even a hidden child. But a link to a group rumored to be associated with serious injury or demise was career termination, resulting in blacklisting and ruin. The threat of this association became a powerful weapon wielded by studio fixers and concerned family members who finally had a tangible threat with which to leverage the stars and their children out of the cult's orbit. The fear was that the taint of Manson would stick permanently. The need for the church to spend precious resources on legal battles and public relations cleanup diverted their focus and ultimately contributed to their internal collapse, proving that not even a cult can survive Hollywood's moral gatekeepers when facing such extreme accusations. If you, like so many others, find the true stories behind the elegant facade of the Golden Age far more compelling than the myths, then please subscribe to Golden Age Files. We dedicate ourselves to honoring these stars by telling their full, complicated truths, no matter how difficult they may be. Subscribing ensures you never miss these essential chapters in Hollywood's hidden history. The crooner's crisis, the Dean Martin family's brush with the cult. The reach of the process extended even into the stately, seemingly untouchable homes of Hollywood royalty, shattering the image of one of the 20th century's most beloved figures, Dean Martin. The perfect illusion of the Rat Pack was fractured by a reality far darker than any Vegas stage light could reveal, forcing a legend into a private war. Dean Martin, the quintessential Rat Pack crooner, embodied effortless charm, casual elegance, and an easygoing, martini-in-hand persona. His public life was defined by the camaraderie of Las Vegas and the sophisticated humor of his television appearances. His private life, however, was anchored by a complex family with his second wife, John Bigger, and their 3 children. It was the eldest son, Dean Paul Martin, known as Dino, and Dino's actress and model girlfriend, Meredith McRae, who was famous for her role on the television series Petticoat Junction, who became deeply involved with the Process Church, finding in its doctrines a substitute for the emotional void left by his father's constant absence. Dino Martin was a successful actor and musician in his own right, part of the group Dino, Desi, and Billy. But like many sons of legendary fathers, he struggled with a profound sense of self and the pressure of expectation, particularly the demand to maintain the family's glossy public image. This vulnerability, combined with McRae's own intellectual curiosity and spiritual restlessness, made them prime targets for the cult's promises of ultimate truth and purpose. They embraced the church's teachings, giving them a sense of purpose and identity outside of their family names. Their involvement included attending services and, crucially, making financial contributions and dedicating their time to the group's operations, viewing the process as a superior form of existence and a spiritual upgrade from their secular lives. For Dean Martin, the conflict was agonizing. His easygoing public image masked a deeply private, old-fashioned man who valued the traditional Italian-American family structure above all else. Dean Martin was profoundly distressed by the involvement of his son and his son's girlfriend in a group he rightly viewed as bizarre and potentially harmful. He could handle a gambling debt or a publicized affair, but he could not abide the existential threat posed by a cult that sought to control the mind and spirit of his child. The thought of the cult's philosophical darkness contaminating his family, the one stable element of his life, created a private crisis that starkly contrasted with his perpetually relaxed public demeanor. The public, who adored the wholesome Martin family image, would have been shocked by the reality of their turmoil, which unfolded entirely behind closed doors, hidden from the columnists. The studios and Martin's management worked tirelessly to keep this involvement out of the press, understanding the catastrophic effect it would have on the star's career. For a star whose appeal was based on his wholesome, simple persona of a man who loved his wife, his family, and a good drink, any association with a fringe group preaching apocalypse and dark deities would have been ruinous. The Martin family saga was one of private intervention, emotional appeals, and the relentless pressure of celebrity life being leveraged against the pull of the cult. Dean Martin used his vast influence and resources to protect his son from the public eye and encourage him to disengage, an exhausting effort that demanded secrecy and subterfuge, often leading to painful family confrontations. The narrative here is a family tragedy that reveals the destructive impact of the cult on the second generation of Hollywood's affluent children. They were financially comfortable, but spiritually starved, seeking answers that their father's immense yet superficial fame could not provide. The conflict between the black capes of the process and the sequined dinner jacket of Dean Martin was a symbol of the war being waged for the souls of Hollywood's youth, showcasing the painful reality of fame that reached even the Rat Pack's inner circle and forcing one of Hollywood's most relaxed figures into a desperate, private battle for his son. Gods divided, the bitter divorce that fractured the process. By the early 1970s, the darkness that Mary Ann and Robert de Grimston had channeled into their philosophy began to consume them, leading to a schism that would scatter their followers and profoundly change the nature of the church. The intellectual movement could not withstand the pressures of internal conflict and external scrutiny, leading to a breakdown of command. The strain of maintaining their highly complex theological framework, the constant public pressure of the Manson Association, and the inherent difficulty of running a charismatic organization led to an irreparable rift between the founding couple. The conflict was not just personal, it was ideological, forcing every member, including the Hollywood adherents, to choose a side between the two charismatic leaders. This internal turmoil mirrored the very duality their philosophy preached, a final, bitter confrontation between opposing forces. Robert de Grimston wished to maintain the church's original, highly complex intellectual focus on the reconciliation of the four deities, the ultimate unity of all extremes, including the equal recognition of Satan. Mary Ann, however, began moving toward a more pragmatic, traditionally Christian focus, emphasizing Christ and a pathway that, while still intense, was less philosophically antagonistic to mainstream society. Her vision was more focused on practical organization and outreach, which Robert saw as a corruption of the original deep philosophy, prioritizing survival over intellectual purity. In essence, Mary Ann executed a hostile takeover, replacing esoteric ideas with the stability of a reliable charitable organization, a far safer vehicle for the celebrity funds they depended on. She understood the necessity of a public-facing, acceptable mission to ensure the organization's financial future. The result was a bitter separation and an ideological divorce that fractured the process into two distinct entities. Robert's faction, loyal to the original concept, struggled to maintain the original vision, but lacking Mary Ann's formidable organizational skills and charismatic appeal to new members, eventually faded into obscurity. Mary Ann's new group, initially known as the Foundation Church of the Millennium, and later as the Foundation Faith of the Millennium, proved to be the more enduring and strategic successor, attracting those who favored stability and a clearer path to salvation through good works, a message easier for donors to accept. Mary Ann's new group shed much of the intimidating, caped and collared aesthetic of the old process, replacing it with a slightly more palatable, if still intense, Christian-focused structure. They reorganized their hierarchy, improved their financial transparency, and began to focus on public service, making the group look less like a cult and more like a dedicated, albeit unconventional, spiritual foundation. This strategic shift allowed her faction to survive and thrive by appealing to a wider, less philosophically esoteric group of spiritual seekers who might have been frightened off by the dark reputation of the original process. For the Hollywood followers, the schism created further instability and confusion. Some, like Carl Wilson, found the division painful and began to distance themselves completely from the movement as they sought stability elsewhere. Others followed Mary Ann, finding her more focused, organized leadership appealing, and her new emphasis on practical work a good outlet for their dedication. The fractured nature of the cult, born from the dramatic interpersonal conflict of its founders, serves as a necessary structural chapter in this narrative. It explains why the group's intense, high art period concluded, and how its philosophy mutated, setting the stage for Mary Ann's later work which would focus on a surprisingly benevolent cause, proving that the organization's relentless commitment could be repurposed toward a more acceptable public mission. The cult may have ceased to exist, but the underlying commitment and structural organization lived on in a new form. The Western Star's weekend retreat, the leading man who walked away. The most persistent and least confirmed rumor involves a major actor, a leading man whose public persona of rugged individualism was the antithesis of cult dependency. His image was the very definition of American moral fortitude, making any association with the process catastrophic and unmanageable for his handlers. In the era of the studio system, the image of the stoic, independent Western hero was sacrosanct, representing everything America wanted to believe about itself. This type of star, often associated with grit, honesty, and American self-reliance, could never be seen as weak, searching, or vulnerable to manipulation. Yet, rumors circulated throughout the industry that at least one such major star had been briefly drawn into the orbit of the process, seeking the intense, existential certainty that their public life could never offer, hoping to solve their inner turmoil outside of the public spotlight. The actor, often whispered to be someone of the stature of Lee Marvin, or an equivalent rugged icon known for his powerful on-screen presence, was reportedly drawn in by the same philosophical depth that attracted the musicians. This star was known to struggle privately with the psychological pressures of fame and the limitations of his manufactured persona, finding the rigid control of the studio system stifling, and the process offered a dark, intense exploration of the self that felt authentic and rebellious. His brief involvement was a desperate attempt to find meaning beyond the box office numbers, a secret spiritual quest. The connection was likely limited to attending a few philosophical discussions or retreats, the kind of spiritual tourism common in Hollywood among the restless wealthy who could afford to indulge their curiosities. However, the stakes were raised dramatically when the process's association with Charles Manson became widely rumored, creating an immediate and severe public relations crisis behind the scenes. This changed the situation from a manageable indiscretion into a career-ending disaster that threatened the integrity of the entire Western film genre. The resulting panic from the actor's management and studio was immediate and immense. A single photograph, a verifiable piece of cult literature in the star's home, or an accusation from a disgruntled ex-member would have shattered his wholesome, masculine image forever, resulting in the immediate loss of lucrative film contracts and endorsement deals. The power of rumor in the Golden Age was a dangerous thing, and any connection to the process was now considered a severe, unmanageable threat, worse than any public affair. Studio fixers were deployed with extreme prejudice. They spent thousands of dollars to ensure the star's name was never mentioned in connection with the process in any police report, newspaper article, or public statement. This required constant monitoring of all European press and even paying off local police officials in 3 different states who had run minor background checks on the cult's property. They were experts at burying scandals, but this required an extraordinary level of vigilance and an extensive network of contacts stretching across the country. The star himself, recognizing the ultimate danger to his multi-million-dollar career and the complete destruction of his public identity, quickly distanced himself, severing all ties and using the Manson rumors as the final, frightening impetus to walk away, never speaking of the incident again for the remainder of his life. This story, relying on the suspense of the unknown name, highlights the immense power of Hollywood's self-preservation instinct. It emphasizes the fear of involvement and the extraordinary lengths the studios would go to squash the merest suggestion of an association, even going so far as to monitor the star's private spiritual activities. The terror of exposure was palpable, proving that even a rumor of process involvement was enough to deploy the full weight of the studio system to protect its property and maintain the illusion of moral propriety at any cost, showing that the most masculine icons were just as fragile beneath the surface. It truly is astounding to see the sacrifices these individuals made to maintain their carefully crafted images. We would love to hear which of these revelations surprised you the most. Please leave a comment below. And as always, We want to know what Golden Age Hollywood topic you would like us to cover next. Whether it is another untold story, a detailed look at a forgotten film, or a biography of a beloved supporting player, your suggestions help us uncover the full, fascinating history of classic cinema. Philosophy and fortune, the intellectuals and heiresses who underwrote the faith. Beyond the struggling musician and the worried family, the process targeted a different demographic, critical to any cult's survival. The wealthy intellectual, the crucial source of long-term funding. They were the silent partners in the cult's expansion, providing the lifeblood necessary for the D. Grimstons to operate globally. While the famous actors provided publicity and a certain amount of glamour, it was the affluent, often anonymous, writers, socialites, and film crew who provided the crucial, long-term financial stability necessary for the church's continued operations. The process was not a cheap organization to run. Its glossy magazine, the travel costs associated with moving the headquarters, and the real estate needed for its communes required significant underwriting, and the De Grimstons were highly successful at soliciting large financial gifts and full-time dedication from their wealthiest members. These individuals were often pressured to liquidate assets and turn over their funds to the collective as proof of their commitment to the coming judgment. This effort included the recruitment of Anne Lillian Wagner, the mother of Priscilla Presley. Wagner became heavily involved in Mary Anne's post-schism faction, dedicating her time and resources to the group after her divorce from Paul Beaulieu. Her involvement illustrates a crucial point. The lure of the cult was not solely for the young and rebellious. It appealed to people from all generations and backgrounds within Hollywood's orbit who were seeking a sense of ultimate purpose that their comfortable, privileged lives failed to provide. She became a devoted, active member of the Foundation faith, giving her resources and time, seeing this as a higher calling than her social obligations. Wagner's story is particularly revealing because it demonstrates how the process sought high-value members who could provide legitimacy and significant financial backing, not just fame. These individuals were often more dedicated, less prone to the erratic behavior of rock stars, and willing to follow the movement quietly for decades. Their devotion provided the necessary capital for the organization to survive the controversies that chased away the more famous adherents. This financial stability allowed Mary Anne to strategically relaunch the organization after the split, ensuring its longevity and proving the dedication of her core followers. The church's recruitment literature and lectures were tailored to appeal to this demographic, promising a sophisticated understanding of fate and a role in a grand, world-changing theological drama. A role far more meaningful than simply attending premieres or charity balls. They were given roles of responsibility, managing the group's finances, printing press, or animal operations, which gave them a sense of control and self-worth, often missing in their lives, as socialites or second-tier film personnel who existed on the periphery of stardom. The intellectual argument disguised the simple financial objective to secure wealth and labor. The economic dimension of the cult reveals a cold, calculating strategy at its core. It wasn't enough to recruit the talented. They had to recruit the wealthy and secure their assets through total devotion, exploiting the spiritual emptiness of the affluent. Wagner's involvement and the subsequent work of Mary Anne's faction show the long-term success of this strategy, securing the necessary funding for the organization to morph and persist long after the initial glamour of the Black Capes had faded, proving that the true power lay with those who could write the largest checks and maintain quiet, long-term commitment. From Cape to convent, the long shadow of the process in modern Hollywood. The formal dissolution of the process, Church of the Final Judgment, was not an ending, but a transformation. Its philosophical intensity and many of its adherents simply changed their names, but not their dedication. The cult's energy was not extinguished, only redirected into a channel of public benevolence. Following the schism and the intense public scrutiny, Mary Anne de Grimston successfully rebranded her faction into a more palatable, mainstream-appearing non-profit organization focused primarily on animal welfare. The philosophies did not disappear. but they were placed in the background, channeled into a cause that was universally considered benevolent and above reproach. The high drama of the original process gave way to the quiet, disciplined work of charity, which was far easier to market and manage. A brilliant strategic move to ensure survival. This transformation is one of the most remarkable and unexpected twists in the story. Mary Ann's organization, the Foundation Faith of the Millennium, ultimately relocated to Utah, where land was cheap and privacy was plentiful, and evolved into the Best Friends Animal Society, one of the largest and most respected animal rescue and advocacy groups in the United States, operating the largest animal sanctuary in the country. Former members of the cult continued to hold key leadership positions, applying the same intense organizational fervor to their new mission, dedicating their entire lives to this new cause of service. This transition from a dark, apocalyptic cult to a world-renowned organization dedicated to saving animals is a profound irony. Former process members, dedicated to the church's original teachings, simply applied their organizational zeal and absolute devotion to a new, gentler mission. The passion for ultimate goodness, which had always been the flip side of the process's fascination with evil, found a safe and publicly acceptable outlet. The massive isolated sanctuary became a new form of commune, dedicated to service rather than spiritual confrontation, allowing them to continue living communally while doing good and escaping the scrutiny of the past. This long-term legacy of the church reveals that the influence did not vanish, but metastasized into a seemingly positive organization. The dedication, the total commitment, and the organizational structure originally intended to prepare for the apocalypse were successfully channeled into building a massive, effective charity. This strategic pivot highlights the entrepreneurial genius of Mary Ann, who found a way to maintain the cohesion of her group by finding a universally appealing purpose, effectively laundering the organization's public image and guaranteeing its financial future. The legacy also includes the influence on other movements. Former members and the church's publications have been cited as influences on later cults and controversial groups, specifically those groups that combined New Age philosophy with sophisticated organizational structures and focused on affluent recruitment. The process created a sophisticated blueprint for high-level recruitment and philosophical manipulation that other organizations would later attempt to replicate, demonstrating its lasting, if subtle, impact on fringe movements. The ultimate end of the Black Capes and the Dark Deities is found in the unexpected setting of a sprawling animal sanctuary, where the devotion of the original followers has been translated into saving countless lives. It is a story that proves the complexity of human motivation, that the same intense fervor that once embraced apocalyptic theology could ultimately be applied to a cause of immense, tangible kindness, resulting in a legacy no one could have predicted in the 1960s. The ultimate cost of the double life. The story of the process is ultimately a human story, one of profound spiritual need, met with cynical manipulation. It is the story of vulnerability weaponized against celebrity, highlighting the spiritual dangers inherent in leading a strictly controlled public life. The movement flourished in the cultural void of the late 1960s and early 1970s, a time when the children of the Golden Age stars, like Dino Martin and the Wilson brothers, felt the crushing weight of their parents' prefabricated success. They inherited wealth and fame, but they also inherited a deep existential loneliness, a search for meaning that no studio contract or record deal could satisfy. The process, with its intellectualized exploration of the darkest corners of the soul, promised authenticity, and in the manufactured reality of Hollywood. Authenticity was the ultimate priceless commodity, worth sacrificing everything for, including one's family ties. The tragic costs of this search were immense. We see the financial ruin and emotional chaos inflicted upon Carl Wilson, whose devotion cost him dearly and whose relationship with his family was severely strained. We see the private anguish of Dean Martin, whose easygoing public face was shattered by the terror of a cult's claim on his son, forcing him into a private struggle to protect his child. We see the very real threat to the careers of high-profile actors who had to live with the fear that their brief, philosophical curiosity might be exposed and destroy their livelihoods, turning their privacy into a constant source of anxiety and fear of blackmail. This narrative holds a mirror to the core dilemma of the Golden Age celebrity persona. That manufactured image was so brittle that any crack of vulnerability, any existential doubt, allowed a cynical force like the process to enter. These stars and their children were not lured by simple promises of power or money. They were lured by the promise of truth and the idea of belonging to an elite group that understood the world's deep secrets, offering a sense of community that the cutthroat Hollywood industry denied them. The process files show that the price of the double life, the public performance versus the private turmoil, was paid not just in alcohol dependency or failed marriages, but in the handing over of one's spiritual autonomy to a manipulating organization. The group provided a terrible, consuming answer to the question that haunted every sensitive soul in Hollywood. Who am I, really? For the privileged, the strict discipline and absolute certainty offered by the process was a twisted form of salvation from their own internal chaos and the moral compromises they had made for fame. The final irony is that the trauma endured by the first generation of stars, the secret children, the erased ethnicities, the hidden illnesses, was transferred to the next generation in the form of spiritual hunger. They were searching for what their parents had lost in the quest for stardom, a genuine, unmanaged self. The church offered a path, however dark, to confront the spiritual vacuum created by the relentless pressure of the Golden Age dream factory, leaving behind a complex legacy of destruction and unexpected salvation that continues to resonate today. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the complex reality of Hollywood's Golden Age. The stars who gave us so much light often carried the heaviest burdens in private, and it is through understanding their struggles that we truly appreciate their resilience. If you value these deep, respectful dives into classic cinema's untold stories, please do us the kindness of hitting the like button and subscribing to Golden Age Files. Your support ensures we can continue bringing you the full, complicated humanity behind the glamour. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts on today's revelations, and tell us, which Golden Age star's secret history would you like us to explore next? Until then, this is Golden Age Files, celebrating the enduring legacy of the Dream Factory.